Twinkle.
Hey everybody, it's Ari with Craft Quest, and today we're going to be doing our episode 12, which is All You Need Is Love. We're going to give you a guide of how to write relationships in your novels. We're going to talk about all the tropes, the cliches, how to do it, how not to do it, and yeah.
Hi, I'm Justine. I'm also an editor for Craft Quest. I am a YA fantasy and romance writer, and I blog. And this, and funny enough for this relationship discussion, is my husband.
Hello, my name is Ishmael Manzano, also editor for Craft Quest. Mostly fantasy and supernatural writing, not so much romance, but so I guess I'll be the odd one out.
Well, she doesn't write really just romance either. She writes YA fantasy, so. That's us.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You guys might have noticed that not everyone's here today, but we all got this. We're a little nervous though. So we're going to start out just kind of talking about the different types of relationships you might find in pretty much any novel. A lot of times people tend to default to just thinking about romantic relationships, but today we want to talk about all kinds of relationships: families, friends, enemies, my favorite, and of course, romantic relationships. So why don't you go first, Justine?
Okay. Are we talking like my favorites, or I guess we could do my favorites. I really do love family relationships. I like found families quite a bit, and either romance or like sibling relationships are really great. I worked really hard on an older sibling character in a story with her two younger siblings, a brother and a sister, and I really, really love those relationships. I like the mentor student relationship, and I'm umming a lot, and I don't know why. Oh, is Jenny here?
Hi.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Introduce yourself real quick, Jenny.
Yeah, cut into
Hi, I'm Jenny Patel. I'm a freelance editor, and I met these two crazy people last October, and we've been like super good friends ever since. So I'm super excited to be here.
Peas in a pod, we are. Okay, well, so basically we were just talking about what kind of relationships that we like to find in stories, be it romantic or platonic, family. I really do like the best friend tropes. I love to see good female relationships in a story that are close friends, just because we see so much of women cutting each other down in stories and hating each other. And I love a good, complex female relationship in a story. Ishmael, do you have any ones you'd like to add that you like to see?
I like to see best friends turn enemies. Usually my favorite type of relationships.
I think you just made Ari really happy.
I don't know. It might be a product from when I used to watch wrestling as a kid, but they always had to tag team partners betraying each other. So I was reading the stories where the people who were very, very close knit suddenly turn on one another, and for whatever reason, it's because you can usually empathize with both sides, and we said one of them is usually crazy, but it always works out because you never get that level of emotional attachment or passion or level of investment in it, except for someone that used to be close to you that then is no longer.
Nobody knows you like your best friend,
yeah,
and
exactly.
so if they become your enemy, that's
that's
kind of a terrifying thing that can get in your head in ways that other people can't.
Mm-hmm.
Jenny, what you got?
Yeah, I love all of that stuff. I like to see really strong platonic relationships between any gender, but just where there's not any romance. Just because two people really click doesn't mean they have to fall in love. I think that's really great. I like seeing strong family relationships. I come from a big, strong family, and I like seeing that reflected in books. I think we see a lot of negativity come from family in stories. So I like to see that positive side of it too. Of course, real families and realistic families in books are, you know, a combination of all of those things. So yeah, I'm totally behind all of the stuff you guys all said too. I think what I like best is I want to see complicated relationships, right? Like not just Disney-fied, you know, either somebody's good or bad, because that's not what real people are like. Real relationships are weird and hard and complicated and involve, you know, weird, hard, complicated people. So that's what I like seeing in books.
Okay, my turn. I agree with Jenny. I do like strong family ties, but I also like kind of the other extreme as well. I like eccentric families, creepy uncles, wacky grandmothers, you know, just strangeness. And I think it's because I grew up with strangeness. So I really like that stability, like in some stories, but sometimes I like to go back to my own family roots of just no one makes sense in this world anymore. I also like platonic friendships. I like really close-knit friendships between pretty much any gender as well, even if they're not human. And I do like that they don't always become romantic relationships. I think some of the best relationships is when you can be really intimate with another person, but it doesn't have to cross that threshold. You know, I don't know. I grew up in a very, very close family. So I think you know, you can kind of have an intimacy with someone and it doesn't really have to go anywhere. So yeah, I had lots of friends that were like that. And so I think that's why I'm drawn to that as well. Pretty much I like friends to enemies, but not so much as enemies to lovers. So there's like a scale with everything, but the friends to enemies, really, I'm attracted to that one because it is someone that you've given pretty much all your secrets to. And when you think of them becoming sort of like the antagonist of the story, they're a worthy antagonist. They know everything about you, you know everything about them, and yet there are probably still some secrets there. And I get really excited thinking of all the emotions that are going through both characters, but also all the conflict and the push and pull. So I'm pretty much down to read anything as long as it's written well.
Did you say you like enemies to lovers?
No, hate doesn't.
You hate it?
Yeah.
No, she loves. Okay, I think Ishmael might have something to say about that.
But I forgot one thing also. I agree with Jenny. Complicated relationships are actually my favorite, as well as enemies to lovers, just because I love seeing two completely different characters have to work through their crap all the time. I don't like it when they get together and suddenly everything is peachy, because it's not how real relationships work. If you got two people who are different, I really want to see the angst and the conflict and the back and the forth and the transformation that they both kind of experience, or lack thereof if one of them decides they don't want to. And then I forgot to actually add that I like relationships with the self. So if a person is really comfortable with themselves or trying to find themselves, that relationship with yourself is really important in some novels for me. And go ahead.
Okay, did you have a thing?
I think that was it.
Just you don't like enemies to lovers?
No.
Why don't you like enemies to lovers?
Just usually it comes from a place of toxicity, you know. So like in that there are high emotions and whatever, but it's not really the same in reverse as friends to enemies. It's, you know, because the animosity goes in there, doesn't naturally go away. So it just gets transferred to this other thing that they become, and then I feel like that just sort of breeds a very negative, toxic sort of relationship that's just not, you know, healthy. And I don't think it should be modeled upon or looked at unless it's to be a, hey, don't do this kind of thing. It shouldn't be like in any way looked upon as, you know, a good thing or a positive thing or a way of changing someone, because the person needs to change for themselves, not for you know, this other person that they're now transferring their, you know, crazy emotions or crazy like attitude into, you know.
Yeah, and I think it's important though that we consider, okay, so we're talking about relationships we like to read. but that doesn't mean that you don't, that, you know, if you like to read about potentially toxic relationships, that's okay. I mean, there's a place for those things. In young adult literature, I think it gets a little bit dicey sometimes, just because we're dealing with young minds, and so there's the concern that, you know, they're going to think that this is okay if you're not modeling the idea that this is a potentially toxic situation. So I think it's important that we're clear when we have these kinds of relationships in young adult, or like, I don't know if you don't really have enemies to lovers in middle grade, but more, but I was going to say and middle grade, but no. But even like toxic friendships in a middle grade story.
I can pull your hair. I want you to stroke your hair.
There was a kid in my middle school that kept messing with my stuff, and I'm not gonna lie, I threw something at him. I can't remember what it was, but it was very toxic. But I agree. I think that I think it's important to kind of stress that there's like a difference between, like, I'm not talking about like beating or anything like that, or the emotional abuse. I'm just talking about like the progression of actually going from having feelings of animosity towards other feelings outside of that, and possibly not experiencing the animosity. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I think it's really important because there are a lot of young adult novels right now where it is very abusive, and you don't really see that other character really changing at all. It's just they're both really awful to each other, and I don't think that that is particularly healthy. But I do think that it's interesting to see how two characters who were enemies kind of come to an understanding and slowly develop or change in that way, and possibly go towards. So maybe I should say it's enemies to friends to maybe lovers. But, you know, because I don't think it is healthy to read, you know, like, I don't know how to say it, but the Edward Cullen effect. Like that wasn't healthy to me. Like, no one should.
They were never even enemies. He was just.
They were just there. Yeah, I think that that's unhealthy. The instant love, the suddenly glued, and there's really no equal side. I think when one person in that relationship has more power than the other, it's really what makes it extremely unhealthy. But I agree.
I was like, Jenny, feel free to jump in and talk about
Okay, so I really actually agree. I am not a huge fan of traditional enemies to lovers, because I think I agree that they're typically very toxic kind of relationships. We've seen a fun sort of new kind of enemies to lovers emerge, which is where they're in competition. And that's sort of what makes them, they're more competitors than enemies. So they have this very strong resentment toward the other, but it's based on their competition and not their personalities. I think that's a fun way of approaching it, because it means as the characters get to know each other better, they actually see that they have more in common, or, you know, something to that effect. Rather than them being true enemies, like they hate each other and then suddenly they love each other. My husband and I actually debate this exact same thing all the time because of Spike and Buffy on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
We were just talking about that. Before the talk started. That's so weird. Okay.
And Logan and Veronica Mars are like that too. That I can't get behind a couple where one of them was abusive in some way and then suddenly they fall in love. Like I just can't do that. And I mean, to be fair, I really would struggle with that in terms of a friend relationship as well. You know, I think progress can be made there, but that's probably not something that's going to occur over the course of, you know, a couple of weeks or a couple of months that most books would take place in. So yeah, I'm with you on the enemies to lovers.
One of my favorites, I have like a real soft spot for the found families. I think that might have been before you logged in, Jenny, but yeah. I really, really love this idea of building your own family, and perhaps that comes from my own. I have a very strong tightly knit family that I basically homegrown from people I met. And so I'm yes, in a pot, bring to a boil. And
she watered me.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I have this like really strong circle that I'm lucky to have, and that all came from people who I met through my various adventures. Which sounds like I'm being like silly, but I'm dead serious. I mean, various adventures. I've had a weird life, so I really do feel compelled when I see characters forming that kind of familial bond when there is no genetics or blood involved, and it's just through experience and being in the trenches there together. Ari is Earharting over that in her little corner. But yeah, like I particularly love father-daughter relationships that are like that. I love when for whatever reason, and I'm not particularly sure why that tends to stand out for me, but I do love that yeah, Giles and Buffy, exactly, like Giles and Buffy, like that person who takes responsibility, and whether or not they intend to end up sort of pseudo adopting this child and becoming this reliable source in her life, in the person's life. I really do love those kinds of relationships. I think they're always very satisfying to read and rewarding. But any family relationship like that, I think, is really interesting. I was trying to think of another good example, but I think you see like that a lot where characters become like siblings. And you see in like large ensemble casts, often you end up seeing this sort of, you know, a pseudo, you know, the mom friend, and then the rest of the other ones that they take care of. We see that a lot. Like if you Six of Crows, which is one of my favorites. That group is the way that they're totally imperfect people, and I love that, and they're very complex and almost unlikable at times, and yet they care for each other, and so you love them through how much they love each other, which is just it's a really emotional journey to go on, and I love that. I don't know. Do you have anything else?
But I want to jump in my side note.
Oh, yes, something.
So on that note, I really like friendship, like the close, the one you're referring to. I did like that book too. The close knit, I can't talk today, group of people who just have that kind of loyalty, but they also call each other out on their crap. Like I like characters that don't just have blind, I mean, some of them have blind loyalty, but you know, some of them that the way they, I can't talk today, guys. They interact is, I don't know. It has a special place in my heart because you do always have the kind of the head figure, the maternal figure, and you always have kind of like the troublemaker who I love. I always love the troublemaker of any group. You've got the person that has
the fact that Ari always likes the bad guy, the Ari, what are you trying to tell us?
I have such a love for villains. It's, I don't know, I'm not villainous myself, I swear.
I was just going to say that's so not your personality.
I think it's because I've discovered a love for developing villains and seeing really the flaws that villains have and the motivations that they might have, and just kind of seeing them as human. Some of them are very unredeemable jerks, to be honest, but the ones that are truly just almost as damaged as the hero is sometimes. And I don't know, I have a soft spot for villains, and yeah. But anyways, I do like.
I think the best villains are the ones that you can sympathize with, that have a strong reasoning, and so where you can almost see yourself going, I don't really know who's wrong here.
You don't know whether you should, like, sometimes you don't know how you should feel about them. You don't know if you should get behind their cause, because their cause seriously is sometimes valid. Sometimes the hero is legitimately wrong, and you just, I don't know. It's so conflicting, and I like
it's better when it's. I feel like it's better when there's a question. I think villains that are like oh gosh, I'm gonna do it again, like a Valentine in the Shadowhunter series and the Mortal Instruments series. Valentine is such a lame bad guy because he's Arch. Exactly, he's Arch.
Yeah. I'm bad for being bad, you know. It's like that kind of thing. I think those things usually work better when you can empathize with the bad guy in a sense where you can see where they may be coming from, even though you don't agree with their method or you feel they're going overboard in how they're doing things. You can kind of be like, well, you're kind of right. Maybe just wish you weren't such, you know, an extremist about it. You know, it's like, yeah, you know.
The Arrow, the show, you know, the Arrow.
Yes,
it's a perfect example because he's supposed to be like the hero, but my God, sometimes he really is the villain, and I don't know which way he's gonna go half the time. I remember the first, like, gosh knows how many seasons. It's like you made the wrong decision, Oliver. But then by the next season, it's like yes, he survived. You know, I don't know. I can't decide whether to love him or hate him, and I think that's what like really gets me is whether, you know, like you just can't decide because you can kind of see both sides of everything. Sorry, I'm like screaming over here.
No,
that definitely makes me think of two kinds of relationships I really like seeing. One is reluctant allies.
Oh, yes.
And that often one of them is a sort of anti-hero, like Oliver is on Arrow. I like that kind of relationship a lot. And I also really like mentor relationships. I think, you know, I especially really like unconventional mentor relationships. I love seeing something like where the mentor is the younger person who's teaching the older person something that they don't understand about. Or, you know, we've seen a lot of like nerd, geek chic kind of mentor characters coming up. That I think is really cool. Of course, I'm a super nerd, so of course I love that nerd culture. And I like seeing that coming in.
Geek for life.
Right. But I think there's something so special about mentor relationships. That just really, I think I'm a teacher at heart. And so I think that's why I really like that kind of relationship with mentors. And, you know, usually it's a protagonist who's being mentored. So I think that's really cool too. I really like seeing those in any kind of stories as well.
He was over here talking and we realized that we were like muted. You had a good unconventional ally. Was that what it was? Or the antagonistic ally relationship? Mm-hmm. You had a good example. Vegeta and Goku. If anybody.
Oh yes, that's a great one. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's a. If you guys don't know, on Facebook, if any of you guys are friends with us on Facebook, Ishmael's Facebook photo is Vegeta and is Bulma. It Vegeta and Bulma? Because that's us.
Yeah.
No, it's not really us because he's not. But yeah, I might be a little like Bulma, but yeah. So. That's that he's a huge fan, and that is a really great antagonistic ally kind of relationship. Yeah. My book actually has a pretty strong friend antagonist kind of story, where the antagonist of the story is also happens to be the main character's best friend, and they're just arguing their points to each other. They still love each other, but they disagree highly on everything. So it's in that realm of having complex relationships and trying to sort of turn the usual tropes on their ear. I that's what I was going for, at least. I hope that actually played out. But with having this main character who has this friend who just really, the story involves really trying to teach her the value of love, but going about it completely in an incorrect, pushy, kind of scary way. And it'll love me. But they're you know, having them sort of try to navigate that kind of relationship while still trying to be friends, and also, you know, one is driving the other crazy. So like that's something that I hope played out well. But it's hard to navigate those things when you're writing, because you have to find a way to hold the balance and to keep the reader interested in it and not have it get too, you know, too lovey-dovey or too angry, or, you know, because they still have to be at odds. So, and still have to be friends. So it was a fun experiment that I did for that story, and I hope it played out well. But those are the kinds of things I think we're talking about when we're talking about like an ally, you know, allies that are reluctant and or like complex antagonistic protagonistic relationships where, you know, we should also, and this was another topic we meant to talk about today, discuss, you know, how tropes that we enjoy, tropes that we want to subvert, which is where I was sort of transitioning with that story. So is there anything you can think of, Jenny, as far as tropes that you hate in relationships, or tropes that you really would like to you know, see more of, or in any of the stories you get across your desk?
Yeah, I'm real tired of love triangles, like just standard love triangle, because I don't know if I've ever read one where there wasn't a clear winner for me. So I struggle with love triangles a lot. And I do sometimes get surprised when someone turns one kind of on its ear. So definitely, I mean, it's such a classic trope for relationships.
Someone asked the other day, and I wish I remember who it was. Sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Someone on Twitter asked the other day, has anyone actually been in a love triangle? Because we see them all the time.
Yeah, private.
That's private.
It's a horrible relationship to be in because no one is really clear. It's usually when someone just doesn't establish where the boundaries are.
Right.
The only book I've ever seen that came close to doing it correctly, and I'm currently not a fan of the author, but would be The Infernal Devices, where yes, it's clear she ends up with Will in the books, but then later on she actually, when Will dies because she's immortal, she actually marries the other guy that she was in love with as well. So it's like it worked. Sorry, spoilers. It's great though. Just
You told the whole end of the series.
It's worth reading, trust me. At least that one is. Everything else is just, oh, don't get me started. But I've only seen it happen once. But at the same time, like the book did capture how like nobody really established where the boundary was, and like some people had to step back. So it's love triangles do exist in real life, but the truth is that they're not really triangles, because to be a real triangle, everyone in the relationship has to technically agree to said relationship. And that really doesn't happen a lot of times in books. Like you have two people who truly, like book one, you know, like Jenny said, you know, and then you go through all the hassle of the next 2-3 books and you still know, but they keep going with it. I don't know why.
I think one book I read, which was weird because on the one hand, they did a really good job with it. And on the other hand, I was really disappointed with the outcome. Kelly Armstrong has and I'm a huge fan of hers. She's not often talked about, but she's actually really successful. So it's odd that she never comes up in conversation that often. But she had a YA series called Sea of Shadows, which was actually an Asian influenced fantasy series. So Ari, I just freaked Ari out. It's her favorite regional mythology. So, and it's
Shadows?
Sea of Shadows. And it's a trilogy. It's very good. But there is one love triangle that is she does choose somebody in the end, but it never felt like the right choice. And the favorite for the whole, at least for me, who I felt was like the one that was obviously who she's going to end up with, does not end up being the person. And it threw me for a friggin' loop. And I honestly, it gave me an issue with the ending. And I'm not sure I don't think it's fair to say the book wasn't good or that I didn't enjoy it, because I did. But in that last few minutes when the decision was made, which wasn't really like a hardcore decision. Huh? No, not Gainesville. It's a different one. It's another series that had a good love triagle, actually.
Oh, is that the one with your the outpost?
Stop trying to figure out which one it is. You later. But yeah, it's a really, really good story. But it's just that last few minutes where I thought it was gonna go, it didn't go there, and it threw me off to the point where I was like, I love it, but I also am kind of like sour about the ending, which I've never done that before. I've never been one of those people who like ships the odd ship. Usually if I ship,
in the game page. But I need to know where this is. No, okay.
Hijack Jenny.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jenny. We've changed this to more open format, and when we do, it gets totally out of control. Apologies. Go ahead.
Oh no, that's okay. No, I was thinking. There are two things that I've been seeing more of in romantic relationships in books that I really, really like. One of them goes back to what Ari was saying about relationships with the self. I think this is a fantastic relationship to include in literally any story. And I especially like seeing it in romantic stories because when someone is going into a romantic relationship and they don't take the relationship to self into it, it's difficult to get to the end and feel like, this is a happy ending when the person doesn't know themselves yet and they're going to be with somebody else. And so I like seeing romantic relationships where the main character is also taking their relationship to self into account with that. And similarly, consent. I am so excited to see consent, like sexy consent, not like, I need you to sign these documents so that, we're 100% clear on what's okay, but like sexy consent where it's 100% clear. Both characters are on board. There's no question involved. Hey, kitty. Hey, kitty. But I really like seeing consent in this. Coralie Moss is one of my clients, and she writes consent into every single romantic relationship that she writes now, and she does it so well. And I'm really happy to see it coming up more. And kind of along all of those lines, mental health. I like seeing various aspects of mental health really be part of the focus of any kind of relationship in a book. It's not exactly a trope, but I think that it really strengthens any kind of the realistic feeling of any kind of relationship when you're bringing the character's mental health into the picture as well. And so that might be, mental illness, or it might be someone, taking better care of themselves through their relationship, setting up stronger boundaries, or realizing their boundaries suck. And so, making them better. I'm really excited to see all of that coming out. And I think young adult literature is a great place for that right now. Because it's part of the diversity of how we're pushing the envelope in young adult literature. So I'm really happy to see all of that.
Ari, do we have anything else on that list there that we wanted to touch on?
Ari, actually, I almost like jumped in because the last 2 points that we have is just hot issues or things that we're seeing in relationships that aren't quite sitting right, or ones that are sitting right, like, hitting it on, you know what I'm saying. And also advice on how to write those relationships. So like my question for you, Jenny, actually, because I've been seeing it floating around a lot, was with the consent, like a lot of people have been asking, well, how do you write that without saying, hey, would you like to have sex? Oh yeah, sure. Like in the heat of the moment. And breaking out of that? Like, how would a person go about doing that? That would be a good question. But those are the last 2 points we have.
Yeah, so I actually just a manuscript that I was editing this week was something we touched on, that there was a scene that one of the author's critique partners had pointed out felt like it needed consent, given what was happening. And it wasn't sexual. It was more of a mind connection kind of thing, because it's fantasy. So, but one character sort of goes into the other character's mind without permission. So one of the critique partners felt like this was very intrusive.
Yeah, like a violation.
Yes. And so we, as you know, the author and I talked about it, and we came up with a way to make it make the consent clear without it being like, you know, the one character coming and saying, you know, can I go into your mind now, you know, kind of thing. So the characters are physically touching at the time, and the one character is communicating the urgency of the situation, and so the other character nods. So we've got, you know, it's a very subtle kind of consent, but the consent is there. It's not just, you know, boom, this one character is invading the other character's mind without, you know, having any kind of consent there. The thing that Coralie does that's amazing is she has these characters, you know, verbally asking for consent, but it's done in such a way that it's just part of the way the characters are together. And it's like I said, doesn't seem like a contract. It's basically asking like, hey, is this okay? You know? And it's so hot, it doesn't take away from it at all. So I think
if you do it, then it's just the normal thing that you would do, like in that situation. Is it okay to take this further? Is it like I mean, if you're not doing that, maybe check on that. But at least with anything that you're trying for the first time, I feel like it's a very healthy way of analyzing or of addressing these sort of things, is to show like that it's okay to talk about these things as you're participating. It doesn't suddenly get silent in the room. You don't have to stop talking. Right. But yeah, I like that. I think that's very interesting. I think I might be reading Coralie's books.
Right. I think that the key is for there to be a question and answer. And I think that, I mean, writers are some of the most creative people on the planet. So as long as you are thinking, how can I show that question and answer? Whether that's verbally, if it's, you know, physically as in a nod or, you know, whatever, I think is fine. But especially in young adult fiction, I think this is so important. It's important to teenagers right now. Consent is a word I didn't even know. I mean, not in that context. It wasn't something I thought about when I was a teenager. But if you consider that for young adult books, like the people who are reading young adult books are 13 years old, many of whom are not in sexual relationships yet, you know, having that consent present in that is a great way of, you know, helping kids get this in their head that this is part of a healthy relationship. So I'm all for it.
Totally agreed. One thing I think we need a lot more of is, like you were saying earlier, Jenny, I believe, these platonic friendships that don't cross over. Or was that Ari? I can't remember. I think it was Ari, actually. But these relationships that are intimate without crossing over into romantic. I also like to see different genders together. I think that's interesting. I think that we have the same, you know, heteronormative tropes often, and I think now we're starting to slowly see different, you know, varying genders, varying sexual identities showing up. And I think that the more we can get of that, the better. I think that kind of exposure to that has been denied in the past is super important in YA particularly. And moving up the ladder. I mean, you have adults that have never, you know, personally known a gay person, or have never, you know, or don't understand it, or trans person. I think those things are extremely important when, you know, I mean, I feel like writing teaches you to empathize with people that are different from you. Whatever situation, when you're reading, you learn how to empathize with people who are not like yourself. And I think that it's so important to get to read different viewpoints on everything. So I definitely want to see more of that. That's one of the things that I love to, whether it be people in different situations than myself, or in the, you know, in differing genders or differing, like, I want to know. I love having those doors open to me, because of the fact that, you know, I myself am bisexual. I never once read a book growing up that involved a bisexual person. So I think it's so important in YA Lit to, when I see gay relationships or bisexual relationships pop up, I get really happy, because that's not something that was just like a given, like, and more it's becoming like an accepted idea. So it's really, you know, that's the kind of thing I want to see more of. I want to see people, you know, shuck the fears of talking about people that are, you know, different from themselves, or reading about people that are different from themselves. And I'm hoping that we see more of that in books. It's already been trending towards that direction, and I hope it continues to.
Yeah, that actually makes me think, in general, I'd like to see relationships that are considered unconventional more normalized, you know? So like gay relationships that are just relationships between gay people, where it doesn't have to be
just,
you know,
a gay man and a gay man who are friends. They don't have to be in a romantic relationship. I agree with that too. You don't see a lot of that. You usually see, I think, more than that, you tend to see the gay guy has a crush on his male friend, or a straight male friend, or you see a lot of the if there is a gay relationship, they end up getting into a gay friendship, they end up getting into a relationship, or you tend to see like,
yeah, that's just an extension of that, you know, a guy and a girl being friends, you know, who end up, you know, it's just kind of like an extension of that same old trope, you know, like you can't have two people of opposite sex, you know, being in a friendship without them eventually hooking up.
And now it's just, you can't have anyone who may actually be sexually attracted to each other ever have a friendship that does not involve sexuality. But yeah, you definitely, I definitely agree that seeing people who may be in some way sexually attracted to each other just be friends, you know, who may have who may fall into your, you know, area of interest, but they don't have to be that. It's just nice to see. I think it's nice to see friendships in general that are strong. And another thing that I see a lot stereotypically with a gay character is the you know, the gay guy who just is there to be the best friend to the female. Like Maria's working on a story. She has a gay male in her story, but he is not just there to be her best friend. He has his own story and his own life going on.
What?
And I love it. And that's the thing, it's so crazy when he's just like the guy who gives her sass throughout that. Like he's not
just the sidekick. He's not like the cardboard friend that she's like, hey, it's not like that. Like his actions influence her and vice versa. Like they move a lot in the story.
Exactly. And I think that's very important. I think that this idea that of people of differing genders and sexualities just being the token person in the story that fills this diversity slot, rather than being a whole person who has their own life going on. Even if it's not what the story is centered on, they should still have their own life going on. And I love the idea I love that about Maria's book. So I'm bragging because I just finished editing it. So actually, we just finished editing it. So we're bragging on her behalf a little bit, but it was really great. And that was one thing that she got right, like nailed, where we felt like she got this idea that he's not just the cardboard cutout gay friend to the main character. He has a life and relationships and his own loyalties, and that is so important. And I think I feel like in any kind of romantic or friendship story, you don't want these one-dimensional characters that don't have their own life going on. And I think that's something that we can learn, across the board, no matter what relationship we're painting, that no character is there to just serve as, this slot for the main character. You want to make sure that character is there for a whole well-rounded reason, and that they're still, even when they're not intrinsically involved in plot furthering, that things are going on behind the scenes that show that he still has, like, they still have a life going on outside of this main story.
Go ahead.
No, it's not so much as far as things I want to see more of, but something I would definitely like to see less of. And I don't know how often or how prevalent this is. I don't really, unfortunately, read too many romance things. But I do, do come across it in other books that I read where romance is like secondary. But there was this one book that I read, I can't remember the name of it. It was like Karen Travis, something like that. And it was a sci-fi story predominantly. But then they had this angle there that I was really kind of annoyed by, because she was a bounty hunter, and the character needed to get like a lot of money real fast. So she went after the top criminal on the list of her bounty. She's like, I'm gonna go after this person. This person, can bring the most money. It's like supposedly the most dangerous person in all the, the whatever galaxy or whatever they had over there. Across several planets. It's the most dangerous person. Accused of like all these kind of horrible things. His father was a horrible person. Was the biggest warlord. Kind of like their Hitler character, and he was like that. Like, and then also accused of a lot of non-consent crimes, supposedly. And so she goes to track him down, and she fights him, and for some reason keeps commenting on how attractive he is, and how, even when he's like, wrestling her to the ground and just tried to, subdue her, she's sort of like, oh, this, like, let me not think of this. Oh, let me not think of that. Blah, blah, blah. This man is dangerous. I'm like, why that shouldn't be a conversation. You should be, you're fighting for your life, and you're sitting there thinking about, oh, this person's attractive. Like, come on.
Now, mind you, the guy ended up being innocent, I think, in the story, if I remember correctly. But she didn't know that.
Exactly.
I hate that. I have
in her heart.
I really dislike overly gorgeous guys, and then the girl, and she only sees how gorgeous he is. I love the monster looking kind of people, where you have to love who they are. I don't know what it is, but in sci-fi, I've had a lot of sci-fi, and that is definitely something that happens in like every book. There's always someone who travels across the galaxy, meets a really hot alien who's a horrible warlord, but suddenly he's perfectly fine in the end. It drives me up a wall, because
I think it's a twist on the classic bad boy trope, I think it's just looking at, he's the bad boy, and so that is attractive.
I do like
and really kind of across the board, I want to see just more nice people as like romantic interests, or the new friend that you meet isn't going to stab you in the back in any way. They're not jealous of you. They're just going to support you and lift you up. Because I think there's plenty of conflict to mind in real relationships without anybody being a jerk to anybody else on a conscious level, Yeah,
I think we're all sort of accidentally jerks at some point, but
yeah,
sure. Times. That's actually like something I started looking into more this year, was just writing relationships like at a friendship level first. I've kind of been more attracted to the friends first, then lovers thing. Like my current whip is like the two people who eventually like each other. They really struggle because one is definitely an introvert, doesn't really like people, doesn't like to talk, has mental health, his own little corner. And, my main character is very loud and extroverted and wants to party and really likes him. It's really difficult to get them together. No one told
you it was okay to write about us.
I'm sorry. I actually had watched, I know K-drama has a bit of a bad rep, but I actually watched a K-drama called My Introverted Boss, which actually went through the character development for very socially anxious, introverted CEO guy. And the woman that was opposite him in the show had actually come up with a system at some point called red light, green light, yellow light for like days when he's not feeling okay. And it really showed like that little act that she was starting to care for him and all that jazz. But it was actually a good example of how you could have two characters who are opposites kind of slowly work towards middle ground before jumping into like all that passionate stuff, and it really
having to like be angry or hurtful to each other.
Like the one thing I kept having to remind myself is it's not that my main male character hates her; it just doesn't like loud anything. It's not his thing. It's not who he is. Don't take it personal. And that's I think that sometimes when writing opposite characters, there's this tendency to go straight to the like wacky extremes and then straight to the middle, and I don't know, it's given me a lot of perspective writing slow relationship building, because so much of it is trying to just understand like what's behind the actual person, and that people can be jerks, but maybe they're jerks for a reason. But the sci-fi thing, like I agree with him. Sometimes it's just weird. Like there's no explanation. I think if there's like a legitimate justification, people might be okay with something like that, but not me. I feel like it's too cheesy. I really like stories, like I said, with the friendship to lover, but I also like extreme, just platonic relationships, best friends who are through it thick and thin, who stay true to themselves, but back each other up, but give each other grief when they do something stupid. Because no one likes friends who just agree with you all the time anyways. And just they all have their own personalities. There's nothing that's more of a turnoff, at least for me, than reading a cardboard character. It's like you just have this backup posse, the backup singers. They're not really doing much, I really like other characters to be involved because it reveals to me more things about the main character. It reveals to me more things about them in their relation to the main character. I don't know. I feel like everyone should be a live person in the book. They should be well developed, including your freaking villains, people. But everyone should be well developed. And so that's what I really love about relationships in books, how it exposes, you can have two people and the way they interact really expose vulnerabilities, hopes, wishes, what you want, etc. There are different ways that you can show it through the relationships with other people. And yeah, that's it. I'm going to be done talking now. So
we can go on.
Oh no! Right. I guess the only thing I don't like, other than the love triangle, because I don't really like them because they're so obvious. I think if you had a main character who is in a relationship with another character, but it's not so good, and they're coming out of that, and then they go into it, that's different. But I think that I would love to see more stories about the relationship with the self, where instead of thinking about how the other person feels, right away, really stop and check yourself how you feel going into that relationship, the character, because a lot of times they just throw themselves in, and then there's constant consideration for the other person, but not necessarily for the self. I don't know if you guys understand what I mean by that, but yeah. A lot of books where it's like, I wonder how so-and-so feels about it. It's like, lady, how do you feel about it?
Right.
How do you feel about it? Do you feel comfortable with this? No, don't look at him. He's not here right now. Like, how do you feel about it? And I don't know. I just feel like the relationship with the self is something I would love to see more of. And it's very important, especially to young adults who are coming into the world. And there are a lot of stories out there with, romantic relationships. And it's really important to remember that you don't just have relationships with other people. You have a relationship with yourself. And that's important to foster too. And I think I really just dislike the love triangle. I mean, there are other ones I dislike, but I can't think about them right now. Anyways, go. Someone else talk, please. Help me.
I think what is so fun about exploring relationships in fiction is that they're such an inherent part of the human experience, right? Like, you can't be a human and not have had a relationship with at least one other human at some point in your life. Even if you end up a hermit and you're living out in a cave and you don't see any people for a long time, at some point in your life, you had a relationship with someone. And we're just really built for that, you know? So exploring that in novels, either as a reader or a writer, is so fun because it allows you to see your relationships differently. It allows you to kind of try on relationships that, I mean, that's what we love about reading, right? Is that it allows us to try on these lives that we haven't experienced, sometimes that we couldn't possibly experience. So I think that with relationships, what's so amazing about that is that we get that experience where we can connect with it and we can also sort of try something new. And it just feels like, I think it connects with everybody because we've all been in relationships of some kind at some point. So that's why I think they're so important.
And I think they definitely offer, I think the source of most conflict involves in one way or another, your relationship with another person. And so I think it's such an important story tool to create real characters who feel things and those things conflict with each other. It's a natural progression of plotting. To have, like, it makes plotting much easier if your characters are fully formed and they have relationships and they're, you know, sometimes they bump heads in those relationships. It's such a it's such a organic way of creating conflict in a story, to have people of differing opinions, or, you know, in a situation where they have to in some way relate to each other, whether it's, you know, romantic or friendship or whatever, familial. Like, if they have to do something together and they're, you know, sort of stuck, that automatically creates a minefield for them. And I think that's that's intrinsic to storytelling.
I had something to add real quick, actually. I love close siblings. I don't have close siblings to myself. My siblings and I are constantly at war, but I love siblings that are close, that have each other's backs, that kind of know each other's secrets. I think it's because I've read so many books where siblings are at war and rivaling, which it's fun and it's cute sometimes and a little dangerous in some books, but siblings that are just, they're close and have a strong bond, probably more so than the father-daughter thing that I have. You know, I like that one as well. But before I finish, I also wanted to say the dead parents trope is probably one that I'm not a huge fan of, where you have no parents and I don't know where they're, you know, I don't know where the parents are. I think if they have like a substitute,
I think it happens a lot in YA, just because you need to.
The kids have to be the ones that take control of their own life. And
if the parents are there, they're going to handle it. Yeah, like,
they're not there, they're dead, or they're somehow like mentally out of it. You know, like,
Megan, actually, if she was here, would be cracking on the fact that the parents are in YA books. They're almost always just like really shitty parents.
Yeah. Or somebody somehow incapable of taking care of it, so the kid has to be the one, you know, growing up and taking care of it, you know. And
I think sometimes it might be nice. I've only read maybe a couple books though where you have like a nice adult like character who's actually helpful and not entirely useless, which sometimes I'm like, how do you not notice your daughter is crawling out the window and your bedroom's like right there? And like the window's squeaking open in the book and everything, alarms are going off, there's a fire somewhere, but the parent who like works on the road has no idea.
My example for that recently has been Stranger Things. Stranger Things, one of the things that makes that show great is that the adults on it aren't completely useless. Like, the kids go to the adults and they're like, there's this thing going on and we don't know what to do. And the adults are like, okay, I believe you. Let's go fix it, you know?
Except for that one adult that Dustin called out What was that Nancy's
Oh,
dad?
Nancy's dad. He's
Yeah.
like, you're useless.
Yeah. Well,
Mike's dad?
Yeah, I think it might be nice sometimes to read stories where the family doesn't necessarily function, perfectly, but maybe someone has some brains in the whole family. I do actually like Stranger Things because the parents like believe almost as much, some of them as the kids do. I mean, the police officer is one of my favorites because his face every time he discovered something, he was like, "Whoa,
Good.
the kids are right." I can't remember, but the woman with the telephone and all the Christmas lights, that was my.
Oh, Winona Ryder's character, Will's mom.
Yes, I love her.
She's also like just as passionate as the kids, and no one listens to her.
Nuts. Everyone thinks she's crazy, but like that's the person to listen to. But I really like the idea of just having maybe even just one adult in the book who knows what's up and that person can kind of go to, because even when you're teens and you want to figure it out for yourself, sometimes you really don't have the answers, and sometimes
or the resources.
Okay, yeah, or the resources. Yeah, I mean, if your character's like 15 and they don't drive, I don't even know.
Yeah.
I think you can only get like a permit. They can't, feasibly get somewhere. What are they going to do? Go hitchhiking? I mean, I did that growing up. I don't advise it. But you don't go hitchhiking. That's not safe. Sometimes you have to rely on an adult, even if it's like the neighbor who's more of a parent to you than your parents, or something like that. So yeah, I think it's important to have everybody fleshed out and to just,
be creative, think outside the box.
Don't be like inarticulate today.
So I think we were cutting off like crazy today.
I haven't even had coffee today. All right, guys. So
coffee.
I woke up really early. Chris said it was creepy, but we'll talk about that in a minute. All right. So does anybody else have anything they want to wrap up for today?
No, I mean, I think the basic takeaways here are your characters need to be realistic and complicated. You need to I think one of the things that a lot of authors have going for them is we're observers. We like to watch people. We like to analyze what's going on around us. So take that and mine it to write what write complicated relationships about two people who want to be in whatever the relationship is, and they like each other and want to make it work, but they have problems because we all do, So try to make it realistic by looking at what's going on in your relationships and the relationships you see. And, let's stop having these same tired tropes. Let's just stop doing the same things over and over. Let's bring some, freshness to it by making it more realistic.
I agree. Well, everybody, that's it for today. Thank you for joining Craft Quest, and we will announce our next episode probably within the next week. Go home, write those relationships, keep everything Jenny and and Justine and Ish said, put it up here and keep it there, because that's what's going to help you make sure you write more authentic relationships. All right, guys, bye.
Hey.
Bye.